Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Book Trek, the Summer of Trek, the Wrath of the Summer of Trek. This is a summer-long event created by Vin at Revenant Reads. He's assembled a great bridge crew of other co-hosts talking about Star Trek all summer long. Star Trek fiction, Star Trek movies, Star Trek TV. I will once again, all summer long, chase the unreachable goal of a live stream where we all get together and talk about Star Trek movies. That would be wonderful. It'll never happen, but still, I can dream. And I started off Book Trek 2024 with a bit of a misstep. Didn't turn out to be a bad reading experience, but it was a short story. I accidentally picked a short story, and it was too late to change my plan. So I added a short story to my night's reading and read it and enjoyed it, but it wasn't a full book. And that was a bit of a jarring experience. And then I thought nothing more of it. I let the day go, the day take its normal shape, walking the bean, eating potatoes, listening to videos about smiley face killers. And then eventually, gradually, as I was doing that, I was adding books to the night's reading to do overnight once the world settles down and everybody goes to sleep. And that was a Star Trek book was added to that list, and it turned out to be another short story. I am assuming I read The More Things Change by Scott Pearson, a Star Trek novel that should not have that title. Star Trek has a serious problem with titles. And The More Things Change is a cliche. It's the beginning of a cliche, so you don't want to title it a cliche. You don't want cliches anywhere near what you're writing, either in the title or in the prose, so you shouldn't do it. But this is the book. Lovely cover there, and I'm assuming now, belatedly, I know a lot of you are saying, duh, why didn't you notice that? I'm assuming that this little thing here, this little kangaroo holding a book, signals that this is a short story and not an actual novel, because the last one had it too. I love this. I thought it was really, really good, but I wasn't expecting it to end at 50 pages. This is very much like the one that I read last time, the one that I read that I talked about yesterday. It's set in the original series, but in an interstice. It fills out a little gap between moments in the show. In this case, between the first movie and the second movie. There's a lot of territory there that has to be fleshed out. In Star Trek the Motion Picture, we reunite our crew. We old-time Star Trek fans were saying, bring the show back somehow. We understand that the main cast are working actors. They have to go where their gig is, so maybe you don't have them. Maybe you don't have access to them. If William Shatner is doing T.J. Hooker, then he's not free for a movie. If Leonard Nimoy is doing In Search Of, he's not free for a movie. So we understand that. We're adults. We understand that. But bring something back for Star Trek. And Star Trek the Motion Picture went above and beyond. It not only brought Star Trek back into production, and not only brought Star Trek to the big screen, but brought back the original cast. Amazing. But it radically changes things. Radically. We get a Kirk who has been gone from the Enterprise. We get a crew that's been scattered to the four winds, and once they're all reunited, once Star Trek the Motion Picture has an ending, perhaps most fundamentally of all, we get a radically redesigned Mr. Spock. It's not just that at the beginning of the movie, Mr. Spock has left Starfleet and has gone back to Vulcan to participate in the Kolinar, to purge himself of human emotion completely, to become fully Vulcan. We're never told what makes him do that. That's a huge, huge decision, to part with his human half, when the thing that made him such an attractive character in the original series was his war with his human half, his struggle to accommodate it with his Vulcan heritage. But he comes back to the Enterprise, and we have the somewhat snoozy adventure in the Star Trek the Motion Picture, and then at the end, Spock mind melds with V'ger, with this gigantic machine entity that certainly seems like the Borg to me. He mind melds with it, and it blows his mind, quite literally. And at the end of the movie, he has reached the absolute opposite of Kolinar. He is now embracing his human emotions. But it's an uncertain process. He's not sure how to do it. And the movie just dumps us there. And keep in mind, you people who only look at Star Trek casually, and maybe only know the movies, keep in mind, as big as the gap is between what we last saw in the original series on TV and Star Trek the Motion Picture, the gap between Star Trek the Motion Picture at the end of the movie And Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, is even bigger. The gap there is even bigger. It's huge. It's absolutely enormous. It's not just the costumes that have changed. Kirk has once again left the Enterprise. He goes to all the bother of taking command of the Enterprise over from Captain Decker, and then he has left it again, and he's been gone for a while. And Spock, well, we get a more textured, a more layered and leathered approach to Spock. Leonard Nimoy does a great job with that as the movies go on, but we don't get anything, any nod in any direction to how he got there, to what that process was like. And this story, The More Things Change, The Reckoning, whatever you want to call it, the dumb title, it plops us squarely in that gap between the first movie and the second movie. So we still have the space pajama uniforms, and Spock does not know what he wants to do with his newly integrated emotions. He doesn't know what he wants to do with those emotions, and he doesn't know how to react to the people who were in his life earlier. Not completely. And that's what this story is. Spock and Dr. Christine Chapel are escorting Audred Dax, a Trill ambassador who has been experiencing a health problem. They don't have time to get her back to Trill. The Enterprise doesn't. So they've taken a shuttle to rendezvous with a Trill vessel. Audred Dax says that the Trill, my people can help me. This isn't a serious problem. I can still walk. I can still talk. But it is going to get worse, and my people can help me. But we are told that the Trill are extremely secretive about their own biology. At this point in Federation history, they do not allow scans of their bodies. They don't allow invasive procedures of any kind. Maybe if a Trill had a minor cut on their hand, they might have let a Federation doctor heal the cut. But other than that, nothing. No scans, no biological information at all. They're very secretive about it. Now, we, as Star Trek fans, know why. Because the Trill are a co-joined species. The humanoid people with the spots on the Trill homeworld, some of them, a small number of them, co-join with slug-like symbionts that live for centuries. And it's a weird process. It makes them a co-joined individual. The symbiont and the human and the Trill person are two separate entities living as one person until the host is incapacitated or dies of old age or whatnot, in which case the symbiont is extracted and inserted into a new Trill host. So, as we see in Star Trek The Next Generation, and as we see, as we see in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, one of the main characters is named Jadzia Dax. And Jadzia is a beautiful young woman. But Dax, the Dax symbiont, is very old. Knew Kirk and Spock and McCoy. Lived in their time and has lived since. So it's a weird thing. It's a very intriguing Star Trek concept that's done really well. Jadzia Dax is one of my favorite characters in Star Trek. But at this point, the Federation, even Federation medical personnel, don't know anything about that. They are absolutely forbidden to know or to question. So Audred Dax is going to meet this Trill vessel. And the reason she's not going with Dr. McCoy, the reason why Dr. McCoy has assigned Dr. Chapel instead, his old nurse Chapel, is because he has a conflicted relationship with Audred Dax. And we know why. Again, fans know why. We don't get the gory details. But there's a great episode of Deep Space Nine, one of the greatest Star Trek episodes of them all, where Jadzia Dax and Benjamin Sisko, Captain Sisko, go back in time to Kirk's Enterprise. It's amazing. It's absolutely incredible. It takes place during the episode, The Trouble with Tribbles. And at one point in that episode, first of all, Jadzia Dax horrifies a straight-laced Benjamin Sisko by saying, well, they're looking at Kirk and Spock as Kirk and Spock are standing in the hallway, in the corridor of one of their ship. They're looking at them, and Jadzia Dax is contemplating, saying, boy, that hair, those eyes. And Sisko says, he's a little bit distracted. He says, yes, Kirk did have quite the reputation as a ladies' man. And Jadzia says, not Kirk. And Sisko is horrified. Imagine having the hots for Mr. Spock. Although all the original Star Trek fans did. So that is not inaccurate. But at one point in the episode, when Jadzia Dax is contemplating Bones McCoy, she says that she knew him, that a previous host of hers knew him when he was much younger, but she says, even then, he had the hands of a surgeon. Oh! So we know why McCoy in this story is a little bit awkward with being cooped up in a shuttlecraft to take Audra Dax back to her people. So instead, he deputizes Dr. Chapel to do it instead. And Christine Chapel is confused not only by the secretiveness of the Trill in terms of their biology, because Audra Dax is not telling her anything, but also she's confused by this new Mr. Spock. Keep in mind, in the original series, Christine Chapel has a crush on Mr. Spock, a deep romantic fixation. She daydreams about him. She, as Scott Pearson put it, in one of the couple of times in this short story where he reveals that he's 175 years old, she carries a torch for him. Do you know what that means, to carry a torch for someone? If you're wicked pissa old, you do. But otherwise, no. I'd like it if an editor had pulled that and other stuff like that out of this story. The story's really good. It's really well done. It's another closet drama. The last one that I read with McCoy talking with Spock in Spock's apartment was a little bit bigger than this, because McCoy's flashbacks are to his days on Capella when he's dealing with a violent warrior species. Here, it's a complete closet drama. The whole of the action takes place on board the Copernicus. The whole of the action takes place on board this shuttlecraft. Spock and Chapel are not far into their journey when suddenly their communications are being jammed. They are no longer able to contact the Enterprise or the Trill vessel, and we see the reason why. A vessel, another unidentified vessel, is hunting them. Spock uses a lot of ingenuity and technical know-how to stay one jump ahead of them for most of this story, while sorting out his relationship with Christine Chapel. And it's really wonderful. That part of it is wonderfully done. She has gotten over her romantic infatuation with Mr. Spock. In this story, she says that the thing that did it was going back to medical school and becoming a doctor. I would like to think that it was a relationship, but we don't hear anything like that. We hear just that she's gained more professional confidence. She is portrayed here just wonderfully. The way she's portrayed, practical and yet philosophical, loving yet stern. It's just wonderful. Just wonderfully done. Far better portrayal than Mr. Spock. And that's not Scott Pearson's fault. The Mr. Spock that we're getting now would feel weird no matter who wrote him, because he is weird. He's not the Mr. Spock that we knew. It's new territory. He himself is striking new territory in terms of what to do with his emotions. He smiles a number of times in this story, and he and Christine Chapel try to figure out what their relationship is going to be. At one point, she has to stop herself from patting him on the leg and saying, "We're old friends." That covers it. That covers it. I know you don't know that, but that covers it. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And at one point in the trials, being knocked around by the weapons fire of a mysterious vessel when you're just a little shuttlecraft that doesn't have any weapons of its own is pretty tough. That's pretty hard on the three people in the shuttle. And during the course of that knocking around, Audra Dax's situation gets worse. Now, as readers, if you're a Star Trek fan, you know that Audra Dax might die, but the Dax will not. The Dax symbiont will not die. But at one point, she is unconscious. And Dr. Chapel, I keep wanting to call her Nurse Chapel, I shouldn't, but because in this book, she's very much a doctor. At one point in the story, with her patient unconscious and Dr. Chapel not knowing if there's a concussion involved, she talks herself into saying, it's not hard to do, but she talks herself into saying, well, I have no choice but to scan her. I don't want to violate her people's privacy, but my patient comes first. I don't know if she's bleeding internally. I have to scan her. So she does. And the first scan shows two different sets of brainwaves. And the second scan shows the slug. It shows the Trill symbiont in her abdomen. And Chapel is partially horrified, but also utterly fascinated by this. And when Audra Dax wakes up, she confesses. She says, well, this is not ideal, and I may be getting in a lot of trouble with my people for telling you this, but I suppose you have to know. And she describes in outline what this is, that some of us bond with a symbiont. And that the absolute importance here is that you save the life of the symbiont. I don't matter. It's the symbiont that matters. All that experience is what matters. That's going to tug at the heartstrings of any old-time Star Trek fan. Especially a Deep Space Nine fan. Especially a Jadzia Dax fan. Audra Dax is not Jadzia Dax yet, but she will be. Dax will eventually be in Jadzia Dax, and what Star Trek fan, what Deep Space Nine fan doesn't remember the death of Jadzia Dax? Jadzia Dax is one of the crew members on Deep Space Nine who dies. She is murdered. And it's horrifying. I mean, it's beautifully done, but it's a horrifying moment when Dr. Bashir comes out of his emergency room and he's wearing an all-red smock. We've never seen that before in the Star Trek personnel. And in the bleakest voice in the world, he says, "I was able to save the symbiont." It's in that moment that we as Star Trek fans realize that we loved Jadzia. To hell with the symbiont. Sure, it informed some of her good storylines, but we loved her. And Bashir knows that the Trill people are going to celebrate that. They're going to be very grateful that he saved the Dax symbiont, but he couldn't save the character that we know and love. There's the Bean symbiont. Oh, goodness. Getting a little Frida Yoga up on her perch. She's been avoiding her perch largely because it gets really warm there, and she does not react well to the heat at all. I noticed last year, though, this in these last 7 months, that she doesn't react well to chill either. My little baby's getting older. But anyway, Audra Dax confesses this while Spock is involved in making repairs on the shuttle and thinking up new ways to outwit their enemy. Technically, because it's a medical mission, Dr. Chapel outwanks him. So she's often jokingly ordering him to give a report on what you're doing. And there's a fascinating bit in the story where she is trying to figure out ways that a non-telepathic doctor can help a telepathic patient. Because that's basically what the Trill are doing. That's basically what they are. They're in some sort of mental communication, the symbiont with the host. And Dr. Chapel is wondering, what can I do to help with that? She at one point calls up from the shuttlecraft's medical database a treatise on how non-telepathic doctors can help telepathic patients, written by Dr. Mbenga. She doesn't like to stay up. Once she sees how warm it is up there, she gets away. A main character on Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and a very popular character in Star Trek fiction, who did a lot of intern work on the planet Vulcan, which of course is populated by touch telepaths. So, that little Easter egg was fascinating. And in the climax of the story, we learn who these attackers are, and we get a pretty good conclusion. Dr. Chapel is very careful to utterly erase from the diagnostic bed and also from her medical tricorder any hint of the scans that she has taken of Audra Dax. So in that sense, Scott Pearson is being careful about not interrupting continuity. The Federation will learn the full details of Trill bonding when it learns them. It won't learn them in a Scott Pearson short story. That's good. That's really good. And the characterization here is really good of both Christine Chapel and Mr. Spock. So, I enjoyed it. I didn't expect it to end when it did. I wanted it to be a whole story. I wanted them to go to Trill, and maybe for Audra Dax to come back to the Enterprise and continue with her mission. I wanted that to happen. They're going to oh my God, they're going to a conference on a planet. It's the planet where Kirk's brother and his sister-in-law are attacked by the flying pancakes. Is that Deneva? I'm blanking on the name of the colony, but it's a really good episode. But anyway, I wanted more. I wanted this to keep going. Or if I couldn't get that story, if that story is just another boring conference, then what I would like Scott Pearson to have done is write Dax's story. We get a little of that. There is a Star Trek anthology called The Lives of Dax that has a bunch of short stories from different periods in the Dax symbiont's life. And some of those are better than others. It's kind of a weak anthology. The one that I wanted to be really good was not. Maybe I'll get to it again with Book Trek this summer. We've got a lot of time to go. But I wouldn't mind if Scott Pearson wrote that story. Like I said yesterday, this is an abandoned continuity. So why not? Why not? No one's ever going to use this continuity again. And it's already making money, and it continues to make money. Deep Space Nine fans are legion, and they love their show. They love rewatching it. But there's no use, if you're a Paramount executive, there's no use saying, well, no, we can't allow you to write the story of Dax, one huge story of Dax, the story of Dax from beginning to end under one author. We can't allow you to do that because we might be using this material someday. No, you won't be. No, you won't be at all. The closest that you could possibly come is Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And Star Trek Strange New Worlds is definitely not taking place in Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek. It definitely is not, for a million different reasons. So this is an abandoned timeline. Well, it's abandoned continuity. Why not? I wanted more of it. That is a good sign. That means that Scott Pearson did his job. But I am hankering to read a Star Trek novel for Book Trek. I haven't done that yet. So I'll have to keep an eye out for this little symbol. Although maybe I shouldn't, because the 2 long short stories that I've read with that little symbol on it have been terrific. Both of them have been terrific. So maybe I shouldn't keep an eye out for that. We will see. I will. I'm not. It's too early in the day. I'm not building any reading now, but I will add a Star Trek book. I don't know if it'll be tonight. I don't know. My co-hosts are very, very good. They're very patient with me. They're very long-suffering. The idea of doing a Star Trek video every day, all summer long, when they are busy with other things, they'll do a video a week, if that. It feels a little self-indulgent. But what is Book 2 for, if not for self-indulgence? I don't know. I'll figure it out. But anyway, that is For Whom the Bell Tolls, or I'll see you tomorrow. Or no, The More Things Change. God help us. Consult me for titles. But anyway, I had a blast. Just ended too soon. Like the original series. But I'll be back. Thank you, Book 2.